Morning, everyone. Thanks for attending our hearing this morning. Good to see everybody. I'd like to call the hearing to order. This morning, we will hear testimony from the United States Capitol Police regarding their fiscal year 2018 budget request. I'd like to welcome Chief of Police Matthew Verderosa, who is testifying before this committee for the first time in his capacity as Chief of Police. Chief Verderosa has had an extensive career within the United States Capitol Police, rising through the ranks and ultimately becoming Chief last March. Congratulations. Also joining the Chief today is Assistant Chief Stephen Sund, who joined the department in January after a distinguished 25-year career with the Metropolitan Police Department. Congratulations to you as well. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all the officers and civilians of the Capitol Police for their service. Their presence allows members and staff to safely conduct the people's work and ensures that visitors can safely enjoy their time on Capitol Hill. You are the ones who put your lives on the line every day to protect Capitol Hill in the same way that our brave law enforcement officers protect our communities all across America. You are the ones who run into trouble as others are running away seeking safety. You are heroes, and we thank each and every one of you and your folks for their service. This week is National Police Week, and Congress has welcomed many of those policemen and women to D.C. to recognize them for their heroism and to remember those we have lost. The United States Capitol Police was the host department for the Peace Officers Memorial event on Monday, which officers from my district in Kansas attended. My community back home was all too aware of the sacrifices that law enforcement makes to keep us safe. Over the last year, 3 police officers have given their lives in the line of duty in my district alone. Brad Lancaster, Dave Melton, and Brandon Collins made the ultimate sacrifice, and they're on my mind this week, along with all of their other fallen officers across the country. With all that in mind, we turn to the issue at hand in today's hearing. Chief, your budget request for FY 2018 is $426.6 million. That is approximately 8% increase from the enacted level. We understand the importance of the critical mission and the role that Capitol Police plays in ensuring the safety of all of us. I also understand that as the mission of the Capitol Police increases, so do the required resources to fulfill that mission. To that point, in less than a month, the O'Neill Federal Office Building will be transferred to the Legislative Branch, and the Capitol Police will be charged with securing the building. Additionally, the Police Department is working towards enhancing garage security and adding pre-screening capabilities, all while maintaining current operations. However, our job is to scrutinize this requested increase and make informed funding decisions. In a tight fiscal environment, many competing priorities exist across the legislative branch that must be ranked and stacked in a holistic approach, which this subcommittee will do over the next coming weeks. I look forward to hearing your testimony, and with that, I yield to Ranking Member Ryan for any opening remarks he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chief, Assistant Chief Sund. Thank you for being here. First time as head of the department. Thank you. First, let me say thank you for your service. I mean, those of us who have been here for a while or new to the Congress, you're always there and not there all at the same time. And I know you're always trying to balance having access to members of Congress, access to the government, but also provide protection for us, both sometimes in our congressional district as well as here. So I want to say thank you for that. We want to make sure we get you the resources that you need to be able to do your job. We have school groups coming through here all the time. A lot of our constituents come here, and at the same time balance that security with accessibility. And that's what we're going to try to juggle here with this budget, but we want to make sure you have the resources that you need. Finally, let me just extend my condolences on the loss of Ryan Lee, the K-9 technician, who had been with the Capitol Police since 2003, and please extend to his family our thoughts and prayers are with them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. At this point, we'll call on Chief of Police Matthew Verderosa to testify. Your remarks will be made part of the record. We have them in our before us, and you may summarize your remarks to the committee.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member Ryan, and members of the committee. I'm honored to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to present the United States Capitol Police budget request for fiscal year 2018. I'm joined here by some members of the executive team and executive management team, including Chief of Operations, Assistant Chief Steve Sund, Chief Financial Officer Jay Miller, General Counsel Gretchen DeMar, Inspector General Faye Rapella, and also with us is the President of the FOP Labor Committee, Officer Gus Papathanassio. I'd like to thank the committee for its unwavering support of the United States Capitol Police and for providing the necessary funding to support our personnel and operations. As we've seen over the past several months, our officers are well prepared and highly trained to deal with any circumstances that they may encounter. What at first may appear to be routine may in fact be a threat to the safety and well-being of the Capitol complex. Accordingly, we have developed our fiscal year 2018 budget request of $426.6 million, with a focus on continuing to equip, train, and prepare our workforce to protect the U.S. Capitol and the Congress, and to ensure they remain safe and secure. As you know, starting next month, the department will begin protecting and securing the O'Neill House office building. This new mission requirement is one of our primary focuses, and we are confident that the transition from the Federal Protective Service to the USCP will be seamless for both us and the House community. Additionally, due to the global threat environment and the tactics of terrorist organizations attacking public venues, we work in close coordination with the Capitol Police Board to determine that additional screening and various means must be employed to continue to keep the Capitol complex safe. As a result, our fiscal year 2018 request includes funding for an additional 72 officers and 48 civilians for the purpose of enhancing and completing garage security, adding pre-screening capabilities, and civilianizing certain sworn positions as part of a multi-year plan to bolster the overall security of the Capitol complex. Lastly, our request also addresses investments in training, recruiting, and outfitting new employees, replacing key equipment and systems that are becoming obsolete, and restoring annual levels reduced in previous fiscal years to meet vital department needs. Our commitment to the mission and our steadfast dedication to ensuring the safety and security of members, staff, and the millions of visitors who come to the United States Capitol is our top priority. This would not be possible without the dedicated men and women of the police department. I continue to be impressed with their overall performance and professionalism every day. We continue to work closely with you and your staff to ensure that we meet the needs and expectations of Congress, as well as our mission, in a reasonable and responsible manner. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to appear here today, and I would be pleased to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Sun, do you have testimony to bring this morning?
No, sir.
Okay.
Nothing to do.
You're just available for questions?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll grill you a little bit. Thank you for your testimony. We'll now turn to questions.
Yes, sir.
Chief, I've noticed in your budget request for FY18, you've asked for 72 new sworn officers and half-year funding for 48 civilian positions. You might discuss a little bit of the purpose of those new positions, why you need them, and why they're a priority.
The focus for the next several years of the Capitol Police is to enhance our ability to accomplish three major initiatives plus staff the O'Neill building with regularly assigned personnel. The three major initiatives are completing the house garage security, providing pre-screening and additional screening at entrances at all the office buildings, as well as enhanced use of the portal scanners, which are currently only used during major events in the House chamber, such as joint meetings, joint sessions, or major votes, that type of thing. The thought is to use those and employ those as a supplemental effect on our current screening, which gives us another capability to detect any types of threats that may be entering the chambers.
How much of this increase is related to the Rayburn House office garage and other garage security projects?
The garage security projects would equate to 39 full-time equivalents. So once we begin the O'Neill transition, which I believe will go seamlessly. We've been working very closely with the transition team to begin that process, and I don't think anyone will even notice the difference other than our staff will be in place, all the systems that we need will be in place. Secondarily, since that's the primary and that's occurring in June, that will be the first initiative. The garage security implementation is subject to funding of those additional personnel. In order to effectuate the change, as we did in both underground garages, the Longworth and the Cannon Underground, you have to do it all at once. You have to do it completely. Otherwise, there's really no point in starting security unless you're going to do the whole building. So once we have those personnel on board, we would be able to begin to cover those open lobbies inside the Rayburn, subject to the construction schedule. And then once it's done, we would complete the fifth.
Well, I'm interested in the timing on that, because yesterday we had the Sergeant at Arms here, and we were talking about the completion of that project and when that security would be necessary. He thought completion of the project would be in calendar year 2022. So do you see this being a need for those officers to secure those doors in 18? Because obviously your point is, if you're not
Right.
done, then there's no point in having partial security.
Correct. It'll take approximately 1 year to hire, train, and deploy. So if funding for these positions were to occur in fiscal year 18, we would likely be able to initiate security at the number of venues inside the Rayburn that would be open, which would be 3 or 4, while the building is still under construction. So, but it'll take about a year from the time that the funding comes in to actually get the officers in the field. So we
Okay.
could start prior to 22.
Okay. And then once garage security is implemented, how's congressional staff going to flow through this? I noted that in the Senate, they have garage security, but as a result, when the Senate staff goes from the Senate office buildings to the Capitol, they actually don't go through screening again.
That's correct.
So in the House side, if we had screening at every entrance into the House office buildings,
Right.
would the Senate staff then have to get screened again to go into the Capitol?
No, they wouldn't. One of the
Okay.
offsets would be, and one of the benefits would be, that once the Cannon and Rayburn are completed, then everyone entering the buildings, whether it's through a door or through the garage, would be through screening. And that would alleviate the need for staff to be re-screened to go over to the Capitol. The staff-led tours, the citizens who would be subjected to the tours would still need to be screened for prohibited items. This is a different level at the Capitol. So we will realize the offset once both the Cannon and the Rayburn are completed, and we will be able to eliminate some posts, and that's how we got it down to the number that we.
So because of that, you've already factored in the reduction in screening
Yes,
posts because of staff?
ultimately at the end.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Mr. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a follow-up on the budget request. You say that you want to hire 48 new civilians in order to turn some current positions filled by sworn officers in the command center, in the background investigations, et cetera. So does this mean that over the course of the next year, you want to effectively increase the number of officers to over 100?
It would be, we would get utility out of approximately 120, the 72 new, plus the 48 that are currently in command center communications, Rayburn range, firing range. Once those are civilianized, we would take those sworn officers at a much quicker rate than we would a new hire and put them in the field.
Okay. And it's a half a year because of the training? Is it
Hiring and training.
takes,
It takes a little bit of time
Okay.
to complete the position descriptions and get that number of personnel on board. It wouldn't be, it would be, we would do it in group, we would hire X number of command center technicians, X number of communications, rather than onesies and twosies. We would do it, we would hire a class of command center technicians, so that we could effectuate the move.
so just to help me understand, so before you even hire and get to the training piece, Capitol Police training, what needs, what level of training or education do they have to have before they even apply for the job? Is there a certain standard, certain level?
Depending on the job for the civilians, the command center technicians, we would look for personnel who have experience in running a sort of a JOC, a Joint Operations Center. For communications, we currently do hire civilian dispatchers, and they do 3 functions. They do alarm monitoring, they do call taking, call taking, and they also do dispatching. So we would eliminate the sworn position once we had a sufficient number. The command center is a larger number, so we would want to bring people on and train them all at once.
What do we spend per officer to train? Do you have that number?
I don't have it with me, but I do have that number, and I can submit it for the record.
Okay, I'd like to get that.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Aide?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, there's some of the, and I apologize because of the schedule, I didn't get a chance to get with you guys before, but I kind of like to, these are all mostly in the context that I'd like to follow up with you on some things. The first one is, my understanding is that in certain, your mandatory retirement age is 57, I think.
It is, yes, sir.
So in some instances, and it kind of gets into what you've talked about in your opening statement about civilianizing certain positions, stuff like that. And I think there's also a waiver where you can, under whatever your circumstances are, which I'm not familiar with, although I'd kind of like to get those if I could, you can extend somebody to 60. But the question revolves around if there are instances where people are retiring and then being rehired in civilian positions to kind of do their same thing. Now, I'm not coming to any conclusion. I know it's like, hey, if somebody's pre-trained, whatever, maybe. But but I also am wondering about, so does that slow down the opportunity for folks still in the system for promotion? I know that your funding isn't the federal retirement system stuff, so you can say, well, they may be getting 2 federal checks, but it's not out of the stuff we're talking about here. So I'd kind of like to get an idea of the scope of the issue in terms of how often has this been done, like say in the last year? And just what the thinking was in terms of, hey, we decided to rehire Aide in a civilian capacity because you kind of fill in the blanks. So that's one, just to get an idea of how that's working.
Sure.
Obviously, my concern, if there is one, under full disclosure, is if this is knowingly or unknowingly prohibiting the opportunity for promotion from within, I just kind of want to know that you guys have thought about it in terms of, for folks that are, and since I'm north of 57, you know, I don't know why I'm sensitive about folks under 57, but just for the heck of it, let's take a look at that. And why, and what the waiver's meant for in case there are reasons why the waiver wasn't used. Then the other thing that my understanding is that your counsel for the department, when you do personnel matters, you have advice of counsel, which is appropriate and all that other sort of stuff, but that the police board uses the same counsel when they are appealed to. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it isn't true, then you can just get me back the information saying, no, the police board uses Yoder and Ryan Inc. for their counsel or something like that. But if they do use the same counsel, my concern is this in a due process sense, where it's like, if they're acting as the appellate authority, then it would seem to me that if they are in fact using the same counsel, you're kind of combining the, if you will, the prosecutorial with the judicial thing in terms of separation of, so that's the thought there. The final one is, since I'm a continual griper about doors at Cannon, which isn't specifically your jurisdiction, but you guys play a part in it, I would like you guys to just give me a short thing saying when somebody's talking about access to buildings and whether we open a door, don't open a door, how long it's open, here's the role the Capitol Police play in it. And I'm not trying to sneak around on the sergeant at arms or anybody else, but if I want to have a discussion as this goes on throughout the construction in Cannon, I just want to make sure that I start out at least a little bit educated.
Sure.
So we'll get back with you offline and get that information from you, and I appreciate
Sure.
it.
I will say that the Capitol Police Board does have the authority to waive mandatory retirement up to age 60. We've done it, as a matter of fact, we have a blanket waiver in place until September 30th of 2017 this year for those who were mandatory this year. Because of the budget situation, the continuing resolution, we wanted to maximize our ability to staff. I am also contemplating, based on the initiatives and the need for personnel, to extend again those who are under 60 who, and it affects, I think in 17 it affected, I believe it was 16 people.
Okay.
Some of which took advantage of it, some of whom did not. In 17 it's a smaller number, I believe it's 12, that are mandatory. We have a number of people who reach that 25 year at any age and decide to go and change options. When we civilianize, what will happen is these individuals will convert over to a civilian position. So they're not going to retire and then obtain additional salary. It's certainly if someone on the sworn side wants to put in for a civilian position, they're free to do so. And some do that. We've had that in a number of instances where people, for whatever reason, sometimes they are tired of shift work and they want some steady duties. We had an official become a background investigator, met the qualifications, hired on as a civilian employee, and they're converted over, as opposed to being double dipping, so to speak, that kind of thing.
Okay, great.
But I'll get back to you.
We'll get on your calendar.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ms. McCollum?
Thank you. Well, good luck with the accreditation coming up. You've been successful
Thank you.
with receiving the gold standard accreditation in the past, so I'm sure you'll do well this time. Mr. Aide and I are both on in the interior. And so one of the things that I was noticing that you were talking about in here with some of your overtime and some of your unscheduled events. And one of them's listed as the holiday concerts, but you kinda know when they're coming. They're not too unscheduled. Memorial Day is Memorial Day and,
That's true.
yeah. And with what is coming up now with the Folklife Festival in July down here, how much of a planning synergy meeting goes on between you, the park police, and the Smithsonian with some of the upcoming events, so that you know you might be having extra visitors coming through the visitor center and things like that? At one point, the conversations were pretty good, and I haven't followed up to hear how well it's going.
That's a great question. Thank you, ma'am. We work very closely, almost on a daily basis, with our partners at the Park Police, Park Service, and Metropolitan Police. The three most prominent permit issuers for demonstration activity, events, special event planning are the Park Service, Metropolitan Police, and the Capitol Police on behalf of the board who controls the traffic regs. So we work very closely. We look at the intelligence. We look at open source information, all the information that's available to us to determine crowd sizes, movements of crowds, determine whether or not streets need to be opened or closed to accommodate large numbers of attendees. Fourth of July is a good example of multi-agency planning. We work very closely with all of the entities to make sure that the flow of people to the particular areas goes smoothly. We share information about any possible issues, whether it's law enforcement or otherwise, in terms of are there any threats or any types of dangers that the public needs to be aware of, and it could be as simple as a weather related. We certainly coordinate very closely for all of these major events, large events that encompass the entire National Mall or large demonstration activity. We have our partners in our command center so that we have direct communication. So we'll have a command official from the Metropolitan Police or the Park Service or the Park Police, sometimes the military, depending on what the issue is. The DC Fire Department has, they actually, for major events, will dispatch all of their medical calls for events that are occurring on Capitol grounds right out of our command center.
Right out there.
So we have a very very good working relationship. In the year preceding the election and all of the various events and demonstration activities, I've never seen the coordination any better. In at least the last 10 years, we've really have a great operating relationship with our partners, and I think it benefits everybody. It benefits the entire city.
Okay, and the air support, the one helicopter that you rely on is provided through U.S. Park Service.
That's correct.
We've talked about that
Right.
before and working on constantly upgrading that. Could you tell me a little more on page 5? You have at the bottom, you talk about some of your missions and personnel, and you have a line in here that says this amount will cover the amount of $40.7 million. This amount will cover our base mission requirements and our support of non-reimbursable events at the Library of Congress. What are the non-reimbursable events at the, I know we were just over there on Monday night, and so you probably have more staff on, but then you're providing security for us. Are there other non-reversible, non-reimbursable events at the Library of Congress that wouldn't have a high attendance of members that you're not being reimbursed for?
The reimbursement goes to any security initiatives that are over and above what we would typically have for those buildings.
Well, what would be an example? I mean, one example is when we go to the dinners, and it's a highly attended event by members, but what would be another, I mean, I can ask the
Right.
library too, but
Sure, if we
you're the one
open-
picking up the tab, not the library, it
If
sounds
we
like.
open additional doors, as part of the regular cost of doing business, if it's something that we would do, whether it's a congressional building or a legislative building, that we would have a normal number of patrols or a normal number of doors open, then we would not seek reimbursement. If it was a private fundraising issue at the library and we had to provide extra access, doors open, those are the types of things that are reimbursed. And there's an analysis that's done between the library, the Capitol Police to determine whether or not it's a reimbursable.
But it says in here, a support of non-reimbursable.
Which is the typical overtime. So if it's a presidential arrival at the library, we will
Oh.
provide X number of officers to
Yes, we have
ensure
to.
that the security is adequate. If it's a large congressional event, that may be one that was not reimbursable, that we may spend extra additional duty on, however, but it's not one of the deemed reimbursable events.
And then the last question I have is kind of a follow-up to what the chairman was asking about standing up, for staff in the garages. That's gonna be a ramped expectation, right? So you say, if I heard you correctly, you're not gonna open up and start doing any of the security until you're ready to open up the doors for everything. That it's going to take a hiring and training on here. So my question is, the dollar figure that you have for the personnel, for the garage, is that based on a full year? Is that based on a half year? If you don't have it with, I'm not trying to play stump the band, could you break that down? Because I'm wondering if a year from now, when we're doing this, that's going to go up another, that column line's gonna go up another 3 or 5%, because now everybody's on full-time, or have you figured it full-time and you might not use it all, which is fine, because you get gold stars from the accounting office, so you keep good track of all your pennies. But I'm just wondering if that might be an increase that we should take into account as we go through and plan our budget for this year, that actually might be more expensive in the pending years.
Right, I believe it's half year funding, so.
It is half-year
Yes.
funding, okay. That makes more sense, thanks.
Sorry
Thank
if
you,
I-
Mr. Chair.
Sorry if I confused that. Thank you, Ms. McCollum. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you guys for being here today, appreciate everything that you do.
Morning, sir.
Keep us safe. Your request for the $2.1 million to invest in a fully functioning alternative command center, at what functioning level would you say the current alternate room is, and what needs to be done to get it to 100% functionality?
Yeah, we have minimal ability, we have very basic ability to continue the function. The addition would be systems that we have in place at the command center, some of which are unclassified, some of which are classified. We would want that capability in the alternate, which I think is easily done with this amount. The capability we have now is less than perfect. We would, it's a vulnerability, and one that we want to close. We have redundancy in our communications, we have redundancy in our data, and this is the third leg of the redundancy, and this would be a 5-minute call-up. This would be the ability to get that room hot in 5 minutes, 5-minute response time.
Okay, and second question, the $40.7 million for to cover offline trainings and overtime. Can you explain what allocation percentage roughly is for trainings and what type of trainings?
The training that is covered, and the Congress has been, and the committee has been very generous with us, and we're not like a typical police department where we can
pull some cars off the street and send people to training. We still have to staff doors at the level and the expectation and the patrols. So the Congress has allowed us, has afforded us in the past 24,000 hours of additional duty backfill. So we would take people off posts and we would fill those positions that they're vacating at the cost of 24,000 hours. And then typically the training is active shooter training, experienced officer training, which provides also legal updates, handcuffing and physical training, various entity training. So certain elements have different requirements based on what their job function is. Investigators are different than the field officers. So it's all those types of things that should be done periodically that we really want to get everyone up to speed back on.
Just one quick, what roughly percentage-wise is that, is the 40.7, and how does that compare to last year?
The training, I believe, was 1.5 to cover of the overtime, 1.5 million of the overtime.
Is that roughly the same as last?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank
That's
you.
an annual, sort of annual request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, welcome, and it's a pleasure to work with you. Over the last number of years, particularly the last 3, but during my tenure on this committee, I can't remember a fiscal year in which the Capitol Police didn't request a substantial increase in sworn officers. In FY16, your actual sworn was 1769. Your enacted sworn in FY17 is 1871. Your request for FY18 is 1943. What kind of planning is done over multiple years that would ultimately one day result in you not needing a substantial increase in sworn officers? I realize there are unique needs that we have, as this is not a typical police force, but the Capitol Police gets a substantial increase, much more than any other agency in our jurisdiction every year. A substantial increase in equipment, substantial increase in sworn officers. It never seems like your mission is reached. So how do you come up with the number of additional officers that you need? Is it based on a formula? Is it based on threats? I'd like to know, in what fiscal year are we going to not see an increase in sworn officers? Because there is a sense that you will never believe that you have a sufficient amount of sworn officers. And I don't mean this as criticism. I certainly want us to meet the needs of the security. But you do say in your testimony that we, as we know, where is the, I want to find it. As you are aware, the department's current sworn staffing levels do not provide the complete and necessary resources to meet all of our mission requirements within the established sworn officer utility or the number of work hours in a year that each officer is available to perform work. Each year, frankly, when you've come, when the Capitol Police leadership has come, I presume that the request that you're making, if we grant it, is going to meet the needs that you have. So I'm not aware that we have not previously met your needs. When we fund your request, to me, we've met your needs.
Well, thank you for the question, and I appreciate that. And I'll give a little background. In terms of the number, 72 plus the number of attrition that we believe is what we can physically handle in our training academy. Based on the 3 initiatives prior to the O'Neill coming into play, we had a multi-year plan. And the multi-year plan was to cover what I and the board believe are vulnerabilities to the complex in terms of the additional screening in the garages, the additional pre-screeners at the office buildings, as well as enhanced use of the portal scanners for more of a regular daily use. And all of the FTE and the civilianization to get the utility out of those sworn that are in positions that would be civilianized would go towards those initiatives. The 72
individuals in the 42, the 48, so 120, would not go to reduce existing overtime. Just, we have FTE shortage, and we've looked at validation through various studies we've done on our manpower. That goes back to, even back to the GAO days, on how we utilize our manpower. Our formula and our process is that we look to the vulnerabilities, we look at what we want to accomplish with the staffing, and then we seek the staffing to accommodate those vulnerabilities.
It feels like that changes every year.
And it does, and it can, based on sort of the model of the type of attacks that are occurring in the world, and we certainly react to known information and also classified information, but this is more about a holistic approach to a bicameral approach to the entire Capitol grounds to make the campus safe, to prevent, to keep the issues that occurred, such as the CBC last March, outside the building, to the extent that we can. As
Are
opposed
you
to
still
actually-
exceeding your overtime cap?
I think we did not have to, and I'll look at my CFO on this, make any type of transfer last year.
We didn't have to transfer, we just had minor adjustments
Minor
to it for
adjustments.
some excess, but still within our salary levels.
But you had more overtime than you were authorized for? Yes or no?
I don't think so. I think we were within our salary appropriation, but I think we had to make notification based on expectation of what that would be used for.
Mr. Chairman, this has been a problem for a long time. I totally support the Capitol Police and meeting their needs, but I've been concerned for a while that you don't have a long-term plan that at least is transparent. It feels like your mission changes every year, and it should change based on the needs that we have and shifting security challenges. But more toys and more officers and just the quest to continue to grow is not appropriate. And so I really think we need a better sense of at what point and at what level does this committee need to fund you so that you have the adequate footprint that you need to meet your mission, so that we can better plan for your funding needs and not get hit with a substantial increase. This is the smallest bill of all of them, and while we've been flat funding, or essentially flat funding, many of the agencies in our bill, the Capitol Police continues to get substantial increases, and I would just like to make sure that those increases are planned for. I have additional questions in the future.
Mr. Mueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Chief. It's nice to see you again, and I want to thank you and your team for allowing me to kind of see your operations and kind of understand how you work here at the Capitol. I'm very much appreciated for that. Just as kind of a follow-up to some of those discussions and some of the discussions you were just having, one of the things that struck me is you have a perimeter that you're covering, and I think there's been tremendous progress where people around the Capitol area feel much safer and secure, and I want to commend you and your team for that. But you also made a point just now about keeping incidents outside of the Capitol, and one of the things you shared with me is, when there is an incident, sometimes it's already in process in the Capitol by the time you become aware, and one of your goals is how do you kind of move that barrier out? Could you speak to that a bit, because I think that's pretty compelling.
Sure. The goal is always to keep the threat as far away from the body, the icon, the Capitol, and the various many thousands of people here on a given day, the members, obviously. So certainly our robust presence is influences whether or not there are negative or criminal acts occurring. know, on any given day, we can have, in any given year, we process anywhere between 10, and that includes staff in our numbers, but between 10 and 15 million people. And there's many more who walk through the grounds. And it's an open campus, and it's a very difficult task to provide a level of security that assures that the Congress and the members can do their work while still fostering that relationship with the public and being a welcoming environment. And we try to do so in as unobtrusively as we can, and with as minimal impact to the business process or the functions of Congress. So what we want to do is we want to keep the bad guy away, and we want to have a deterrent here. And by having free screening at doors and keeping the threat outside and having the ability to more easily lock down a door if necessary to engage the threat outside of a door or in the street or on a border street preferably, than getting close to the campus, that's the goal. And sometimes we're able to do that and sometimes we're not. You can walk up close to the building and be, certainly eyes are on you and we have other technology, but the goal is to keep it as far away as you can. And to that end, personnel, it does take a significant number. I'm certainly very aware of the impact that we have on the rest of the legislative budget, and the committees have been very gracious with us in terms of providing us resources. And I do want to be completely transparent in how we operate, and the number of 72 over multiple years will accomplish the goal of getting to the end result of achieving those 3 mission sets plus a meal. The completion of the garage security, the free screeners outside, each open access point, and the border scanners. And I think that total package will help make this campus safer.
Great, thank you.
Chief, in your budget request, you're asking for $2.1 million for a new command center.
Yes, sir.
And I believe that's in the Fairchild building,
is.
which, as we know, is a building that is privately owned, that we lease. And I wonder what your thoughts are about why that's the preferred location, and would it make more sense to have that new command center in a building we own? It's a $2.1 million investment, and so maybe you could speak to that.
Sure, and it's mostly technology. So it's actually in a space that would be dual used. It would be vacated by the chief administrative officer. There would be some minor alterations. Well, I don't want to say minor. There would be some alterations to that space, but it's for systems. The cost to bring the systems in, to run a pathway, and to have that capability. And we believe we'll have that ability to do it much sooner if we were to outfit this portion of the Fairchild building. And I think by the time, if we were to vacate that space, likely most of this technology would be ready for life cycle at that point. So I think it's a good investment. It's more immediate rather than wait for that capability. We determined that it would be appropriate to ask in this.
What about a site that we own? Did you look at any other sites? Like, what about the O'Neill building, for example?
Well, that is an option, but it's really dependent on the tenants that are in that space now, and people vacating that area, as opposed to, so if it's gonna be extended for a year or two, and I'm really not sure what the length that the current tenants would be in that space.
But if the space was available there, that would also be an acceptable site
Yes.
for you? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. One of the things that we've seen around the country is just more concerns with district office safety. We discussed that yesterday in a hearing we had, and there's some measures that have been requested in the House of Representatives budget to allow additional security measures within district offices. And what role does the Capitol Police play in that? In many cases, when members of Congress attend events, sometimes the local city police will be there just to have a presence. Do you coordinate in that in any way? Is there anything in your budget request that would reflect some of the additional concerns members have with district office security?
Absolutely. One of the things that we do, we spend, as a matter of fact, we do the law enforcement coordination at the request of members. Members can work through the sergeant at arms and request us to do an analysis on an event that's at a district office an outside event. In just thus far this year, we've done 184 member-related law enforcement liaisons with district offices. And that also includes reaching out to the local law enforcement. We do it for both House and Senate. We unsolicited reached out to 178 offices when we found something that was occurring, that was planned to be occurring at either at a district office or at a member's event. The advent of a lot of the technology and the information that's out now helps us with that, but we have investigators that actually look at these events to determine whether or not there's a threat, at what level of concern that these events are occurring, and that's certainly something that we do. And we also provide threat assessment and security awareness briefs, not only for DC-based offices, but we'll also do that for district offices. And a lot of times we can do that through technology, through VTC or webinar, as opposed to going, but we can also physically go out.
Is there anything in your budget that reflects some of the growing concerns? Is this sort of a standard work that you've always done to protect, or do you see changes in your?
We're doing it at a
2018?
much greater rate, so we
Okay.
are spending some additional duty on
Okay.
that, some overtime money.
And there has been a discussion, Mr. Taylor brought this up, and Ms. Wasserman Schultz, regarding overtime. And I noticed in the request, it's 40.7 million in overtime request, while at the same time we're asking for the 72 new officers. Is there a point at which the new officers, if granted, would reduce that, or is the assumption that if we didn't grant the officers, you'd need more overtime? You know, where should assume at some point there'd be an offset. Like if we
Right.
had, what would be the optimal number of officers where we wouldn't have as much
Right.
overtime?
Well, you know, that's a great question, and in this bill, there will be some offset when the bodies or the individuals that are hired that take over the O'Neill. We do have some additional duty that's set aside for the O'Neill building. I think annually it's about $5 million. And once we get utility out of the officers we hire, based on the bill for O'Neill, they'll be able to subside some of that overtime. The 72 would go to new mission sets, as some of the members have indicated, and those would go to those 3 initiatives. To reduce the current mission, whether it's FTE shortage, unscheduled events, we do plan.
Because that's about 10% of your total budget.
It is
overtime.
and we certainly and it adds up in my recollection of all the studies to about 150 FTE that overtime, and there is some level you want to get it to about 90% staff, 10% overtime. You know, it's a balance. Sometimes, remember, we're paying overtime to cover positions when we're going to hire people. That overtime will stop once they're out of the academy. So, for existing mission. So one of the things we want to do is perhaps extend the mandatory retirement, which would reduce the need for overtime and keep people working for an additional year at a regular rate. So
Okay.
it's a balance. It's really a.
So if you extended the date of retirement, that would allow you to reduce costs on the overtime because you'd be training less new individuals.
That's correct, and we'd have people in the field, and the problem is.
What are the pros and cons of that?
Well, it's at a higher rate. We're paying people at a regular rate. It's
So
cheaper.
the pros and cons of extending the
well,
age retirement.
at some point we get to the point where we have to start looking at, you know, the vigorous workforce and the reason why we have the 57 mandatory retirement. I think, you know, some people would want to raise it, some people don't. I think it helps keep the workforce ready and prepared to deal with eventualities. And that's a larger law enforcement benefit picture, as opposed to if we were to raise our retirement age, for instance, to 60. What effect would that have on other law enforcement agencies that are under the FERS system, that get law enforcement benefits as we do? Right now, given the fiscal situation, I think it is probably one of the best options, because it could save having to hire half a class.
Even though they're being paid more, it actually still saves you more money because
Because-
you're not hiring and training and going through
Right,
the
we get
process.
more utility immediately.
Right.
Out of it.
Okay.
Because it takes about 8 months to really train,
Yeah.
equip, field training, and get them in the field on their own.
Yeah.
After it takes about 4 months to hire.
Okay. Mr. Ryan?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So, as I'm listening to all the questions about staffing, and I'm new to the committee, so are you the number, the end number? Ms. Wasserman Schultz was saying, okay, what's the number?
Right.
Is that number based on kind of day-to-day, yeah, we have these events and the folk festival, we got all this stuff going on, it's kind of, it's already in the works. This is stuff we handle all the time. Tours, gets busy in the summer. Is the number based on that, or is the number based on 9/11 happens? Or there's a major incident at the Capitol, which I assume you want to be prepared for.
Correct.
So what is your number based on? And 'cause I'm listening, I'm thinking, yeah, we have our daily maintenance, and in Niles, Ohio, there's 50 cops or whatever, and
Right.
no one's gonna be, there's not a lot of threat,
Right.
as opposed to here.
Right.
So can you help me understand what
It's-
you're thinking?
The number is to accomplish the task that we do today, the level of service we provide today, plus the new initiatives. And once we fill the billets, if we fill the billets, if it's deemed appropriate, to meet those mission requirements for the portal scanners, for the pre-screeners, for the
Day-to-day,
garage
yeah,
security,
yeah.
then I'm not gonna ask for additional personnel once that's done.
Mhm.
If the mission requirements expand beyond that, and I don't know if they will or they won't, based on world events, new mission requirements, whether it's internally driven, whether it's Capitol Police Board driven, or however those, if it's designated that this is the mission and this is the mission requirement, that we need to have an additional building, or we need to have additional asset or this type of coverage, then I will ask for those. The alternative is, and we've done that in the past, we've worked overtime to cover the new mission requirements. And we do that basically every day, with sort of routine, shortages. But these are new mission sets, so we get to that number and we're trying not to increase the level of overtime. We're trying to get to the level that we need to have to meet that requirement to handle those mission sets. And we believe those mission sets will enhance our ability to secure the facility. So there's going to be unknown mission all the time. So if we have a demonstration or an event that pops up, the Pope visit was an example of, that was an unplanned event. It was basically an all-hands event, and drove a lot of additional duty, drove a lot of personnel. We can handle that on an ad hoc basis. We wouldn't plan for that just to have those people around in case we have those types of events. And those are the perfect opportunities to use overtime to fill the need. This is a day-to-day. This is a day-to-day requirement to have additional eyes at doors to be able to secure the outside.
So we get through all this, we get through the Rayburn and the Cannon and the pre-screening and all of that stuff, then you'll be at a level that you think you can sustain. And then, should the threat level increase, you would come back to us and say, look, X, Y, and Z is happening, we may need a classified briefing about it, whatever the case may be, but we need an additional 50
We would do a
officers.
business case.
Right.
And we
Okay.
would either be successful in, demonstrating that there's a need or not.
Right.
And again, it's really in consultation with my bosses and having the big picture for the entire campus.
One final question, just to get a idea of what's happening within the force. So I mentioned Ryan Lee and the tragedy there. How are we doing with our rank and file as far as, the health and wellness and, stress issues?
Right.
Because it's expensive to live around here, and people have families, and there's a lot of economic issues, plus the stress of being a Capitol Police officer. Are we doing enough to help in that regard so that maybe we can prevent any kind of future incident?
So that's a great comment, a great question. Very tragic, and we're a close-knit department, more than probably some. when in some respects we're like a family. You know, I've had very close contact with my troops, particularly those units that are really affected, closely affected, and they're handling it. It's tough. We'll get through it. We do have great support from the CAO and the Office of Employee Assistance. Also from some of our brother and sister police departments, particularly in this case, Fairfax County Police have been outstanding in terms of peer support and those types of things. So, and the community has been great, and the Congress has been great, the community staff have been great in terms of helping us through those things. And I think that, you know, morale's kind of a fickle thing. It can go up and down, and it can turn on a lot of things. I think the troops are generally in a good place. They're generally pretty happy. They really understand the mission. They love the mission. All you gotta do is look at the dome and you understand what the mission is. It's very simple. We're here to protect you all and what you do. And I think they take great pride in that. I think that I think we have what we need. We can always sort of expand on our wellness and look to improve communication and make sure that we're really talking about issues, serious issues that we need to talk about. Some issues you need to confront. Some issues are, you know, are things you really need to talk about. And you know, and we've been fairly fortunate, but it's a societal thing. I think it's a law enforcement thing. There's stigma and there's all kinds of emotions involved, and I think that we are very cognizant of our troops' sort of feelings and attitude, and we sort of fostered the conversation. And I think we try to confront it. At least the assistant chief and I have been. That's our position on it, and I think we can always use some help, and we look to our partners to really support us.
Okay,
I don't know if that
great.
answers the question.
Well, you know, you're there for us. You know, we need to be there for you. And we know this is a tough job. And we just want to make sure that whether it's on the training side or on the wellness side, day to day,
Sure.
that, you know, the men and women of the force are getting what they need from a wellness perspective, from a mental health promotion perspective.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with anybody, but it's a high-stress job.
Right.
And in addition to, as I said, your normal high-stress family life and living in the most expensive place in the world, you know, it's like it all adds up. And I want to make sure you guys are okay, and that we're on the cutting edge of making sure you got what you need and the programs you need to take care of the men and women. So
yeah, I'm very appreciative of all the support, and I mean, and I'll be honest, the officers do get to know the staff here. They get to know the members, and they've been very supportive, particularly in this particular case. And we look to our friends at EAP and OEA, and you know, we do have seminars, and we do talk about things, and we do have some HR programs available. And we're certainly gonna look at it, and we're gonna foster the conversation and make sure that everyone understands what happened and understands if you can ever understand why, and then move on, but make sure that everyone is at least talking about it and we're responsive to people's needs.
thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Mr. Aide?
I have nothing further to yield back, Mr.
All
Chairman.
right, Ms. McCollum.
Just a follow-up on the office. I had mentioned early in January during an organized meeting that I had a 40% rent increase, and of course couldn't afford that on our budget, so I then tried to find a place that would sign less than a 2-year lease. We did it, but we worked with both the sergeant and with Capitol Police on moving, and it was very much appreciated with my staff, and I'm sorry that I'm not sorry, I was frankly a member of Interior, and I missed the meeting yesterday because we were having public witness, but I know that that's sometimes that overlaps between the sergeant's office, your office, as well as mail security and working with U.S. Post Office and everything else again, so, not that, you know, we need lots of little handbooks, it doesn't have to be something that gets put out, but I had seasoned staff, so they kinda knew how to work through that. But we actually had a conversation around our conference table about who do we notify about the security camera? Okay, we need to call St. Paul PD, we need to do this, we need to do that. We had our own check sheet. And I know people don't like moving their district offices a lot, but if at some point, I think we're gonna write down what we did and maybe give it to you, and that might be a template, to use. But I did want to follow up on the offices too. I know that there seems like there's a lot of, things going on right now with, some of the town halls. Those things happened in '06 and '07 with town halls. So for some of the newer members, they might think this is a brand-new experience that Capitol Police and our local police departments are dealing with, but it's not. It's a lot of the same. But you need to be there in coordination and working with that. What is the follow-up, though, on the Metro? I have, you and I've talked about this a little bit, Mr. Chair, and we are real close to a Metro stop. And we've had a lot of breakdowns, we've had more fires, more episodes than the rest. And a lot of our staff are down there. We've got constituents down there, and we had talked about, kind of doing training, figuring out how to train either with Metro or with you on, what's the right side, how do you get out of one of the subway doors, what's the best way to exit. Where are we on that? Because we're paying close attention in my office, and I haven't seen much come through yet. Is it Metro holding that up?
No, actually, we have a meeting today, a planning meeting on a communications and response capabilities demonstration, Capital South Metro. That'll be occurring sometime in July, early July.
Okay.
We have been busy, and I believe the obligation plan has been approved to provide communication capability in the tunnels on platforms for our radio system, because once you go down, you're out of touch.
That's right.
But we will have the capability to be able to communicate in all three of the close-in metros, Capital South, Federal, Center Southwest, and Union Station, and all the rail tunnels between the stations. And it's basically 1.8, and it was New Year 2007. I think it was radio nutty. Equipment required to be interoperable between WMATA and us. And also radio coverage into the 3rd Street Tunnel, which is another area where we frequent, traverse, and we're looking for interoperable communication. We have attended many of the regional, the Metro exercises.
Yeah, because Metro sometimes seems, I know you're working on it,
Yeah.
that's why I was wondering if
Yeah.
Metro seems to have some dysfunction with getting their emergency things
They've been
done.
very cooperative.
They've been cooperative?
And we've also, based on our conversations, worked with, I've mentioned to Chief McLean of the Park Police that was one of the issues that,
This
we
is
also
the
need,
zoning.
we also need to look at, interoperability with the Park Police, which we do have. So, I think we're moving along. I think I don't think there's any hold up. And I think we're progressing to a point where I think we'll be ready to talk about training.
Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks. Just a couple of additional questions. Chief, you referenced your bosses,
Yes.
who are the Capitol Police Board, and I asked the sergeant yesterday about the dotted line that we have here, which is unfortunate, that leaves us with a more difficult situation in trying to conduct oversight over the police board. You're not a member of the police board with a vote, and you referenced that some of your mission is assigned by them. What percentage, how much of your mission is assigned by them, and are you generally aligned with the assignments to your mission that they have given you? as opposed to what your plans and vision are for the department? And to what extent does your request result in things that they have added that you would not have?
Right. I think that the board and I have a very good relationship. I go to the board much more than they come to me in terms of any requests, any needs, things that we're looking at doing, whether it's initiatives or training. The board initiatives are things that we talk about, at least the three that I've discussed here, the portal scanners, garage security, obviously. Some of it is driven by whether it's the House Sergeant at Arms or whether it's the Senate Sergeant at Arms. The board collectively, and I agree that these three initiatives, including garage security, the pre-screening, the portal scanners, are things that will enhance our ability. It's been my experience with the board that they've been very supportive of me. They basically leave the running of the police department to me. They do provide great counsel, I think, sometimes. I have very frank discussions with the board about whatever the issue is. I give my opinion. The board generally, and almost 99.9% of the time, comes to consensus, and they include me in that conversation. I don't vote on final initiatives. But I think that, you know, in terms of these initiatives, I'm fully supportive, and it's I wouldn't say that it's direction directly from them. It's more of an integration of the conversation. We're looking at the best ways to provide security on the campus in light of Paris, in light of Berlin, and all the other various types of threats that are out there. And always with the mindset that this is an open campus. So what are the things that we can do to enhance our ability to protect us at the vital points?
What happens when you have a disagreement with the board on the direction that your mission should take? And how much of your budget is nice to have and gotta have versus gotta have?
Well, I think what we've asked for is the gotta haves. I think this day and age, and I think last March's incident highlights the need to not have the confrontation in the building. The confrontation in March occurred at the CBC, and that was designed for it, and it worked. I mean, the CBC performed flawlessly. The officers performed exactly how they should have. And what we want to do is we want to be able to keep it at arm's length, keep the fight out if we have to, rather than at the port. You know, and obviously the buildings were never designed for the multitude of screening that we do, the office buildings. So it's difficult, particularly with such cumbersome equipment. So the more we can do to keep it isolated out is better. So I think we're pretty much in lockstep, the board and I, in terms of the need to think out of the box, be imaginative, and there comes the portal scanners. You know, we don't want disruption on the floor. We want to be able to detect things that the regular magnetometers can't. So using those in concert, in being complementary with the typical magnetometer and now the portal scanners, I think it creates a much greater ability to stop things from getting to the places we don't want them to get, and some very serious items and other things that just aren't detected.
Mr. Chairman, I just think that the Capitol Police over the years needs to do a better job of predicting for us and planning over multiple years what it is their needs are going to be, because it does appear that we get a new significant request with expanded mission, even considering that we're always going to have unanticipated needs because of the shifting security issues that we have. And so, Chief, I really think that you need to spend some time with your leadership team, because it's not just you. Your predecessors have also faced that challenge. I do want to ask you about the overall morale of the Capitol Police, because there was significant tension under your predecessor, particularly with minority officers. And what steps have you taken to improve that morale, and how do you think it's going?
Again, it's hard to put your finger on the pulse. Depends on who you talk to.
You know, I think morale has been fairly positive. I may not be the best person to ask. You can ask the rank and file, I'm sure, talk to you and talk to.
That's why I'm asking.
Talk to the members. You know, I have an advantage in that I've worked many of the posts that most of the rank and file work. I've walked the footbeat, I've driven a police car and ridden a motorcycle and done specialty assignments and done, you know, building security. So I think that, you know, generally when I'm out and about, I think the troops come to me and they tell me the good, they tell me the bad. You know, when we look at, hey, what's going on or the things that we can fix, I'm always open to looking at things a different way. I think the assistant chief is the same way. He comes from the outside with a fresh set of eyes. He's an operationally based individual. He ran special operations for the Metropolitan Police for a number of years. So, in terms of all of those things, and you know, the effect they have on the officers day to day, and that's really what it's about. We're talking about day to day attitude. I think the officers are in a good place. I think they certainly have my respect. The troops have my respect. I respect what they do every day. I'm impressed with the operational ability of officers. No one likes to be held accountable. Some people may think I'm a disciplinarian. I think limits and accountability is good, and it validates everything that the officers who come to work and do their job every day appreciate that. And I think that's a very small part of what we do. So you're always gonna have people who may have been through the process, the discipline process, and they're upset. But I think that generally, by and large, we're in a good place. I think people are motivated to come to work. We do talk quite a bit with the troops.
Just to drill down a little bit, and then I have one more question, and then I'm done, Mr. Chairman. What about diversity? There really has been a challenge that the Capitol Police has faced systemically with diversity. Diversity in your leadership, diversity in recruitment. How are you focusing in on improving that? And, I mean, I don't mean any disrespect, but it is hard to take your word for it. As you said, you're in the leadership now, you're not in the rank and file. So, Mr. Chairman, it might be helpful for us to have an open, you know, an informal meeting with the Capitol Police union leadership so that we can hear from them. We don't have to do it in a hearing, but it would be, I think, good for members to hear from the union leadership. We have done that from time to time, and give them an opportunity without the Capitol Police leadership here to talk to us about, you know, some of their challenges. But
certainly, but
diversity has been a problem.
we have a great diversity officer, Natalie Holder, who comes to us from the private sector, and she's done a lot of work with municipalities, and particularly in New York City. We have, what I think we do is we include people. I think we.
But do you have goals? Do you have goals to increase diversity?
Absolutely. We want to broaden everyone's perspective, and we want to be able to provide opportunities.
Numerical goals. Do you have a goal to say, take the leadership of the Capitol Police diversity from where it is now to a higher number?
We're always trying to build a bench with a very diverse workforce.
So no.
So yes.
So you don't have
well, I don't have
specific goals
specific
written
numbers,
down.
but what I have is a policy of inclusion and being able to expand the bench.
Okay, but without a plan, I mean, does your diversity officer have a plan that she is following
Sure,
to
we just started
increase?
mentoring with outside agencies and internally. We also are providing opportunities for people. Of course, they're all validated promotional processes, and we look at all of the aspects of promotion that we should. And I think that we are very inclusive, and I think that if you look at the numbers in the promotions, it's a very diverse group, and we've given opportunities for
I've
women
never,
and minorities all along the
I mean,
line.
through the history of my career, I've never really seen significant changes in diversity without a specific written plan on how to accomplish it. And so, are you planning on developing a specific written plan?
Yes,
on how
through our
you will-
diversity office, we are.
Okay, if you could share that plan with me,
Sure.
and the process that you're going through to develop it, that would be great. And then lastly, I'd like to know how Capitol Police handle equipment that belongs to a member or a staffer that's been lost within the Capitol complex and found or recovered by one of your officers. What happens?
Sure. Well, it's processed on what's called a PD 81, which is a property record. And depending on the property, depending on how if you can legitimately determine ownership, then it's generally turned back over to the owner of the property. If it's part of an ongoing case, then there are other things that have to occur for that to happen.
So if a member says that they have equipment that's been lost and you find it, it would be returned to the member?
In the general sense, yes.
Okay.
You have to identify, you have to be able to positively identify the property and be able to establish ownership.
Right,
And
and
then
if ownership is established,
If it's part of an ongoing case, then there are additional things that need to be done.
but if the member owns the equipment and there is no ongoing case related to that member, then the equipment is supposed to be returned.
Right, in a general sense, yes. If-
No, I mean in a specific sense. If the member loses the equipment, says they lose the equipment,
Yes, ma'am.
and it is found by the Capitol Police, it is supposed to be returned.
If ownership has been established,
Right.
it'll be returned. If it's subject to an ongoing investigation, there are additional things
Okay.
that need to be turned
But
over.
not an ongoing investigation related to the member. If the equipment belongs to the member, it has been lost, they say it's been lost and it's been identified as that member's, then the Capitol Police is supposed to return it, correct?
Well, it's not I can't give a yes or no answer on that, because I know.
It's a simple
more
yes or no
parameters.
answer.
Well,
If you if a member loses the equipment,
Yes, ma'am.
and it is found by the Capitol Police or your staff, and it is identified as that member's equipment, and the member is not associated with any case, and that is their equipment, it is supposed to be returned, yes or no?
Depends on the circumstances, and if the circumstances are.
I don't understand how that's possible. Members' equipment is members' equipment. Under my understanding, the Capitol Police is not able to confiscate members' equipment when the member is not under investigation. It is their equipment, and it's supposed to be returned.
Well, I think there's extenuating circumstances in this case, and I think that, working through my counsel and, the necessary personnel, if that in fact is the case, and with the permission of, through the investigation, then we'll return the equipment. But until that's accomplished, I can't return the equipment.
I think you're violating the rules when you conduct your business that way, and should expect that there would be consequences. I yield back.
Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony today. Chief, Assistant Chief, we let you off easy. Made Chief here answer all the tough questions, but we appreciate both of your leadership and service to our country. We appreciate the many officers that are out guarding the Capitol right now, that are away from their families, putting themselves in harm's way. All the support personnel, civilian personnel. It's a dedication to service, and we just really respect what you do. We want to make sure we have a fine-tuned budget, that we're putting money in the right places, and so we'll work with you and the members and both parties here to come up with a right budget going forward. And we look forward to successful service and safety in this Capitol campus. With that, the subcommittee will adjourn until 2:30 this afternoon, when we will hear from the Library of Congress.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned. Yep.